Hey Commander players, it's EK, your EDH edutainer with a deck tech that's a blast from the past. We're playing nothing but permanents under the banner of one of my favorite legendaries, Samut, Voice of Dissent. Samut, Voice of Dissent is a legendary human warrior for 3 red and green with double strike, vigilance, and haste. Not only that, but she also grants your entire team haste. If that weren't enough, she also offers utility with her activated ability, allowing us to pay a white mana and tap her to untap another target creature. That's a ton of text just for 5 mana. Despite her strength, other Naya commanders offer a more concrete direction for deck building. It's these constraints that Commander is built on, as restrictions breed creativity. As a result, Samut's open-ended text box can lead to a paralysis of choice for deck builders, first-timers and veterans alike. With that in mind, let's try and restrict ourselves to inspire a surge of creativity. On paper, Samut doesn't seem to ask for very much except that you play some creatures. Giving haste to your team is pretty powerful, allowing you to turn them sideways and crack in for immediate damage. Plus, your tap abilities can be activated immediately. That means mana dorks are going mana neutral or even mana positive because there's no summoning sickness holding them back. To leverage the speed that Samut grants all her friends, we're building around the card Primal Surge. Primal Surge is a sorcery for 8 and 2 green that says exile the top card of your library. If it's a permanent card, you can put it onto the battlefield. If you do, repeat this process. If our deck just happens to be all permanents, casting Primal Surge just results in us taking our whole deck, turning it upside down, and slapping it down onto the battlefield. How's that for a game of Commander? Commander's the format where huge Haymaker spells have a home, and Primal Surge certainly fits that bill. It's a card whose mileage is determined by our deck's construction, so getting the most out of Primal Surge means that we can't rely on staple cards like Cultivate and Blasphemous Act to fill their usual roles in ramping and controlling the board. Now, you'll most often see Primal Surge being built in Jund or Sultai because having access to black means having access to permanent-based tutors like Sidisi Undead Vizier and Wishclaw Talisman. Because we're in Naya, we don't have that option to tutor up Primal Surge, which means that we have to find it the old-fashioned way, by naturally drawing it. Not having a direct line to Primal Surge means that we're going to lean more heavily into everything that isn't Primal Surge. Yes, it's the build-around and theme for our deck, but it's not the only thing that we can do, and it's not the only thing that we should do. We're not a one-trick pony. Plus, focusing on the shell around Primal Surge offers a more consistent and multifaceted approach to the game. Not relying on one big spell to win the game means our game plan is harder to disrupt, which results in a more resilient game plan. At our core, we're looking to ramp into a massive Haymaker. We need to be able to consistently reach a level of mana production that can support that. To accomplish exactly that, we've got a variety of mana accelerants spread out across our curve, 21 in total to be exact. Classic ramp options like Llanowar and Finhorn Elves join Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Bloomtender, Somberwald Sage, Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, and Faeburl Elder to make sure that we can get that ball rolling early on. Not only that, Samut granting haste means that these early mana dorks are never dead draws in the late game, as they immediately produce mana the turn that they come down. Alongside our dorks, we've got mana multipliers like Mirari's Wake and Regal Behemoth that double the mana output of our lands. The Great Henge is going to give us extra green mana along with some life gain and card draw. And if you saw my first video, you know how much I love cards that do multiple things. Nixblamation is going to triple the mana output of any of our sources. Just remember that Regal Behemoth and Mirari's Wake are additive, not multiplicative, so you'll get 4 mana per tap of a land, not 6 if one of them is out at the same time as Nixblamation. Now that we've got our ramp figured out, we need some actual things to do with it. This is where the bulk of our creature base really starts to shine. After all, we're a big mana ramp deck. We've got to have ways to spend that mana and advance our game plan, and we can keep it wholesome with underrated creatures like Urbrask the Hidden, who's yet another haste enabler, Sigarda Host of Herons, or Dragonlord Dramelka. Or we can really dial up the heat and play cards like Etali Primal Storm, and start casting extra spells from our opponents for free. Zakama Primal Calamity gives us an outlet to sink our mana into, alongside being a terrifying 9/9 that untaps our lands when we cast them. We could also completely change the fabric of the game with one of my favorite cards of all time, and that's Lurking Predators. Every time our opponents cast a spell, we reveal the top card of our library. If it's a creature card, we put it into play. Otherwise, it goes to the bottom of our library. We've got 49 creatures in our deck, so it's very likely that we're going to be hitting off of that and burying the table in a horde of creatures. And if those aren't scary enough, well, we can embrace our Eldrazi overlords and cast Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger or Kozilek Butcher of Truth. These are sure to set off some real alarms at the table, so just be warned. Ulamog exiles permanents and mills libraries, something this deck can take advantage of quite well, and Kozilek gives us a burst of card draw so that we can keep our foot on the gas pedal. Both of these curve toppers have some insane synergies with our Rube Goldberg value machines and are just a ton of fun to slam onto the table in general. So these huge, awesome creatures are great and all, but we've got to make sure that we can keep digging towards them consistently. I mentioned that our lack of access to black makes directly searching up Primal Surge via tutors impossible, so we're going to have to be diverse in how we approach our deck's card economy in general. We need to rely on raw draw sources like Mangara the Diplomat, Esper Sentinel, and the Monarch mechanic, and we're going to utilize the physical creature cards themselves as a resource. Fauna Shaman and Survival of the Fittest let us pay to pitch creature cards that might not always be relevant to the board state like Eternal Witness, and get value engine pieces like the 2 Selvalas, Seedborn Muse, or Temur Sabertooth. Or maybe we've got our value engine online, but we need a payoff. We can pitch Sakura Tribe Elder for that Ulamog and close things out. We can also leverage our very fluid curve with things like Birthing Pod and Yisan the Wanderer Bard and bypass the need for actually drawing any of these creatures in the first place. Birthing Pod is 3 and a Phyrexian green for an artifact that we can tap and pay 1 and a Phyrexian green to sacrifice a creature. We can search our library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the sacrificed creature's mana cost plus 1, and then put that card onto the battlefield and shuffle our library. We can only activate this anytime we could cast a sorcery. Yisan the Wanderer Bard is 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary human rogue bard that we can tap and pay 2 and a green to put a verse counter on. When we do so, we search our library for a creature card with mana value equal to the number of verse counters on Yisan, put that onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Yisan and Birthing Pod allow us to climb the mana curve ladder directly towards the combo and the value pieces that we've been looking for. However, they can also be used to convert our creatures into protection pieces, or even more ramp if we need to. As an example, Pod can turn its tap Finhorn Elves into Grand Abolisher to protect the actions on our actual turn. We could also go find Dockside Extortionist, which just opens up the possibilities of casting Primal Surge, another Haymaker, or a pile of stuff that much faster. There's also the possibility of popping off with it and doing some disgusting combos. To grasp the full extent as to how out of hand Yisan and Birthing Pod can get, let's talk about taking our turn. Whenever an opponent takes their turn, so will you, thus making it our turn. Seedborn Muse and Wilderness Reclamation unlock our board state to draw more cards, generate more mana, and ultimately spend more mana. Samut, Rhythm of the Wild, and Urabrask are here to make sure that our creatures have haste so we can proactively use them too. No need to wait a loop around the table for Summoning Sickness to wear off, we're just going to use them right away. We're also packing a few cards to make sure that we can spend that mana to its fullest extent, especially so if we're getting extra untaps. Vidalcan Ornery says we can cast spells with Flash, Yiva, Nature's Herald, and Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, let us play our creatures with Flash, and with 49 creatures plus our commander in our list, that means we can play half of our deck at instant speed at a minimum. Untapping every turn with Seedborn Muse means we get to tap Selvala Explorer Return to parlay every turn, we can activate Yisan's ability every turn, accruing more verse counters and tutoring up creatures into play. That's also more activations of Fauna Shaman and Captain Sisei's abilities so that we can continue to find more creatures to flash in and drown the table out in board pressure. While we're on the topic of board pressure, we should absolutely make mention of the removal suite in this deck since there's definitely going to be pressure on us. We're trying to do a lot, and we're trying to do a lot pretty often. That's going to paint a target on our backs and warrant us a lot of unwanted attention from our opponents. Since we can't run spells like Path to Exile and Wrath of God, we've absolutely got to think outside of the box on this one. Mangara of Corindor taps to exile a permanent, Duplicant exiles a creature and becomes everything about that creature, and Reclamation Sage can blow up artifacts and enchantments. A fair bit of our creature base is also just invested in making sure that our opponents can't do certain things in the first place as well. Linvala, Keeper of Silence, shuts down activated abilities, including mana abilities. Archon of Valor's Reach is saying that players can't cast certain types of spells. Since we've got no instants and very few non-creature spells in our deck, we can very safely name anything that's not a creature. When we combine that all with Urabrask the Hidden, forcing our opponent's creatures to come into play tapped, we can hopefully get a solid grip on the game. So we've gotten this far, we've gotten a handle on the game, how exactly do we really pop off? What's going to put that final nail in the coffin if we still need to close things out? Well, off the bat, there are 4 routes that we can talk about, and Primal Surge putting our entire deck into play is certainly a good place to start the discussion. Primal Surge is going to flip our entire library right side up one card at a time, so it's important to be aware of the order in which permanents come into play. We've got no duds that are going to stop us from flipping our library right side up, so we have to know how things work. We're going to have to resolve the stack in a very particular order, so keep an eye out for when a few key pieces enter play. And before we go any further, this is a major public service announcement, because I know what y'all are thinking right now. We're running Platinum Angel to make sure that we can't lose the game once the stack starts to resolve. We've got an Archangel Avacyn that can come into play to make all of our creatures indestructible until end of turn as well. Plus, as an added safety net, the tandem of Dragonlord Dromoka and Grand Abolisher are going to double down and make sure that our opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, just in case we're trying to pursue this line of play on our own turn. The easiest way to promptly close things out is to denote when Terror of the Peaks enters play, because every creature that enters after them is going to deal damage equal to their power to any target. Sending all of that damage to our opponent's face should do the trick and end the game. If we've got Gisela Blade of Gold Knight in play, that means that damage is going to get doubled, and the number of creatures we need to flip after Terror of the Peaks is reduced. But say Terror is pretty far down in the stack of creatures that we've got coming in, and we don't piece enough damage together from that. Well, for starters, worst comes to worst, we're definitely going to have Formidable and be able to produce enough mana to activate Shaman of the Forgotten Ways ability, which is essentially going to cast Biorhythm. That's going to set each player's life total equal to the number of creatures they control and get their life totals down low enough to win during combat if it doesn't eliminate them outright. We could even sink mana into Sakama's red ability and destroy all the other creatures first. This deck also has the ability to do some ridiculous loops using Temur Sabertooth, and these don't even require Primal Surge, so we can just do these if we have the right board state. We can play Dockside Extortionist for 1 and a red, getting treasures equal to the number of artifacts and enchantments our opponents control, pay 1 and a green, and bounce it with Temur Sabertooth's ability, and recast it an infinite amount of times if our opponents control 5 or more artifacts and enchantments. Selvala Heart of the Wilds in particular is probably one of the most powerful cards in this deck, and in conjunction with Temur Sabertooth, because she's got a card draw payoff and a big mana generation ability bundled together in her text box, let us just do some ridiculous things. We can use her to make infinite mana with Temur Sabertooth or untapping engines, and she's also got the ability to draw out our entire deck and generate the mana to cast it as well. Selvala says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. So if we play the biggest creature on the board, we get to draw a card. It's incredibly likely that Zakama, Ulamog, or Kozilek are going to fit this bill so we can play them, draw a card, or play them, draw another card, etc. to draw out our deck. Selvala is also going to tap and add mana in any combination of colors equal to the greatest power amongst creatures we control. So if we've got a creature with power 7 or greater, we can create infinite mana using Temur Sabertooth and Selvala in combination with each other. We're going to pay 1 and 2 green to play or recast Selvala, pay a green to tap and activate Selvala, and then 1 and a green to activate Temur Sabertooth's ability, bouncing Selvala back to our hand, for a total of 6 mana. If all of these big flashy lines don't come up, or just don't work, we could just do everything the old-fashioned way and win outright by going to combat. We're a creature deck after all, so it's very likely that we're going to be on the offensive to begin with. Cards like Pathbreaker Ibex, Aurelia the War Leader, and Elish Norn are going to make sure that we get in there for a big enough swing, and just make that natural aggressive play pattern that much more potent. No matter which way you go about trying to win, the end result is surely to be utterly explosive once the pieces come together. The true beauty is that many of these pieces are interchangeable or have some redundancy, and there's a ton of depth and always a new combo or interaction to discover every time you play this deck. That's it for this deck tech. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thought of a card that you think should be included, or have a commander you'd like to see me brew or break down? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, ding the bell icon, and help me fight the evil algorithm overlords and the control players by liking this video and leaving a comment. I'll catch you next time.